Good morning and welcome to another weekly update. I hope you're doing well. A couple of things to talk about this week, and so let's get right into it. We're going to start very heavy with development and Microsoft Teams together, but in a slightly unexpected way, I suppose. In the week, I got asked if I knew of any good tooling for developers who were using Microsoft Teams, but not necessarily developing with Microsoft Teams, more working in an organization that had Teams, communicating with Teams, having Teams as part of their workflow, but they were developers anyway. So what developer programs, applications, services inside Teams would be good for running development teams? And sometimes when I get questions like this, I try really hard not to just answer the email or the LinkedIn message or whatever it is, because if I can write it up as a blog, then it means other people might be able to benefit from it as well. So this is a new blog post I put out this week. It's called Using Microsoft Teams Tools for Developers. And in the blog post, I go through just a number of different steps and areas to look at inside Microsoft Teams that might be useful for your development team. I kind of start off with store apps and looking at the different areas. There is actually an entire category called developer tools inside the store. An interesting one on that, just to kind of be aware, that's probably a self-selecting category. So what I mean by that is, and I didn't really go into the loads of detail in the blog post because there wasn't really space or time, but the way it works when you submit an application to the Teams App Store, you have to fill in this kind of big form in the submission process, and you categorize where your app goes and what type of application it is, what industry it's for, what keywords. And those are quite restricted. You can't just choose all of them. You can choose maybe 3 keywords or 1 category or something like that. So for that reason, it sometimes follows that what is in the developer tools category may not be like an exclusive list of everything that is useful to developers. So it's just a kind of a caution that you might find good development tooling not in the development tools category as well. Like, it's still worth checking out that development tools category. It definitely is. But you might also find that actually there's other useful things elsewhere in the Teams App Store as well. So that's the first place to go. And then I go through some other places as well. You can look in the blog post, as well as calling out some examples. Something like Agile Poly can really help do stand-ups asynchronously, and so it just kind of asks, what did you do? What are you doing next? Is anything blocking you? Very kind of succinct. And if your stand-ups are taking a really long time and are not, super well managed, it might be worth looking at this as a way just to a process maybe you go through before the stand-up, and then you can just focus in on what needs to change. And then finally, I talk about app templates, because I also think there's some good app templates, applications in there that would be good for dev teams. I've called out 4 in the blog post, so you can go check them out there. And then last of all, if you can't find what you want, build it yourself, right? And the simplest way to do that actually is using the webhooks, because you can tie that into an existing CI/CD process just by calling like an HTTP post. You can post a message into a team. So that could be a really good way of just kind of bringing some automation to your build process and your pipeline, making your dev teams a little bit more productive. So that whole blog post is up on my site. You can go and have a look at it. So if you've got developers, if you run a dev team, if you are a developer, maybe that's worth checking out just to see if there's anything in that might be useful to you. All right, let's move on to something else, and a blog post in the week by the Azure Communication Services team. And this is a new sample that they've released. And this specific sample is around using AD as a trusted authentication source to issue tokens. Now, this is kind of like a slightly odd one, because the ACS model around token issuing and authentication is very lightweight. It's up to your code running the ACS libraries to determine when and how to issue an identity and an access token to any user. So if you're building an API, you will build that into your API level. So your API makes a decision that says, yes, this person can participate in ACS activities, like they can join a video call or whatever it is. So we're going to create them an identity and we're going to give them an access token. And it's up to you if you want to store that identity and tie it into the user's profile or whatever, or just generate a new one every time. Completely up to you. It's super lightweight. It's really just a GUID. For some people, though, that is not what they want. What they want is a managed identity, something like Azure Active Directory. Now, if you're an out-and-out developer, you can tie those two things together in your mind and say, well, that's fine. We can AD secure the API. We can manage how we issue the tokens. We can tie those things together. That's fine. We can manage that. However, if you're not an kind of experienced developer, or that makes you a little bit nervous, then maybe this sample is for you. Because in this sample, they've done that work. They've brought together the kind of Azure AD authentication trusted service, if you like, together with the ACS identity to provide a system in which the SDK uses the AD identity in order to issue tokens. So let me just jump to a screenshot in the blog post. So you can kind of see here, like, this is a SPA, this is an API. The SPA has an Azure Active Directory token. It then calls the web API, which acquires the token on behalf of the user. It goes and gets some information. It goes and accesses it generates a token, and actually, I think it stores the token in me extension. So in Azure AD, there's an extensions place you can just put information. It's kind of like a bag of, storage property bag, I suppose, like a key value pair place to just throw stuff. I think what they're doing is putting the ACS identity, into that extension bag. So that's cool. It's not a bad idea. Like if that's what you want, like that might be useful to you. If you've already got an API in play, maybe you want to put it there rather than in Graph. Just something to think about. But like if you just want a quick sample to get running with and just see how it's done, this is a great place to go. It's a good idea. So that's worth checking out. If you were going to do that anyway, then definitely worth checking out. If you're just unsure, it looks from the sample, it looks like it's built on the standard. There's a set of good sample code for Azure AD around kind of token issuing and scopes and permissions and security and stuff. I think it's built on top of that, which is nice because it's kind of familiar code then. So you can go check that out. So that's a blog post by the Azure AD team. All right, a few more things to talk about. So there's this is interesting. So this is not new announcement or new news or anything, but it's actually quite handy. There's a new glossary that's been added to the team's developer documentation. So an A to Z of interesting terms and kind of phrases or words or descriptive phrases to talk about things that, that show up in the documentation a lot. So if you're new into this and this is a completely crazy foreign language you don't really understand, then hopefully this will really help and help you understand and get to grips with what on earth is going on. So we've got things in here like adaptive cards, we've got app catalog, app manifest. The nice thing here is that there are links away to different places. So if you look at app manifest, it's all very well known what the app manifest is, but here's a link to the schema so you understand how to build one. App scope, we've got things like Blazor and Bicep, which get mentioned in the documentation, but if you don't know what they are, then it's good to have that kind of reference point. So this is really nice, I think. It's good to have this. What do I want to say? Reference here for people new into this. I'm just trying to work out what all these links do. There's some interesting links out to different places. They kind of roughly go to an interesting. So like client secret, I was like, well, where's the link for client secret? But actually, if you follow it, it goes out to like add authentication to your Teams bot. So that kind of makes sense. So this is really good. I wonder what starts with Y. Yo Teams, of course. So this is cool. I think this is useful. And if this stays up to date over time, I think it'll be a very useful repository of information. So really good. Nice to see. It helps build out the documentation, make it even more useful than it already is. So that's really good. Okay. What are we going to talk about next? Okay, let's deviate slightly towards the end because I've been talking for a little bit now. So we've done the first 10 minutes and it's been heavily Teams and developing on Teams. Let's go sideways slightly. So this is not strictly Teams or development, but it is kind of interesting, and I think it will probably resonate with quite a few people who have found themselves as amateur videographers, film editors, producers and directors over the past couple of years of our own content, as more and more things have moved online. And so we've become familiar with tools that we weren't familiar with before. We've become familiar with NDI. We've become familiar with things like Stream Decks. We've become familiar with different cameras and using different cameras to hold attention. So this is something I'm trying to get more into, the idea that if I change the camera angle, it's kind of more interesting and it's not just like a solid talking head all the time, and experimenting with different camera angles because, it's kind of interesting to do and it's fun as well. And so anyway, the reason I'm talking about all of this is a new blog post by John Skeet. Now, John Skeet, if you don't know the name, and you might not if you're coming from the team side of the world, but if you're coming from the development side of the world, you hopefully will know the name John Skeet. He's an experienced C# developer. He has contributed a lot to Stack Overflow in this area. He has figured out how to deal with dates and times in .NET, for which I'm forever grateful that I don't have to. And he kind of does lots of fun things. And one of the things he's obviously been spending his time on, in the same way that lots of us have, are things like Stream Decks, NDI, and video. And so he's put together this blog post that actually combines both NDI streams and Stream Deck in a really interesting way. So if you're not familiar with what a Stream Deck is, let me show you real quick. So this is going to be the easiest way to show you. I think this is a Stream Deck. Oh, sorry. This is a Stream Deck. So I can't pull this far enough really. So it's a little, it's a little panel. It's got a load of buttons on it that light up. You can change the icons and they all do things. So they're quite common in kind of people putting together videos because they very quickly let you change things like the camera angle by pushing these buttons. I can mute and unmute. I can run the weekly update banner. I can do that so it kind of stays on for 5 seconds or something and then goes away again. And I can do all sorts of things with it. So it's a really nice automation tool, if you like, for people putting together videos. What John has done is figured out that these buttons, as well as just being icons, can also show video, and has taken that one step further to create a setup where every button is a different NDI stream for as many cameras as you have, showing the feed that's on the button of the actual camera, which I think is amazing. Like, it kind of blows my mind in a few ways. The first is that these Stream Decks can even show video at all, but they're just rendering JPEGs. They just obviously changing the JPEG very quickly. And then also that as a productivity tool is really cool. It's interesting really because John ends in typically a modest way, I suppose, by saying that he's had a lot of fun with the project despite the lack of practical application for it. I think there's huge practical application for this. I really do. So right now, if you wanted to do something similar-ish, you could go and buy an A10 Mini, but it's expensive. And the base model A10 Mini, it doesn't do like a monitor output. So you'd have to get the next model up. So then that would give you an HDMI monitor output. What I mean by monitor output is like a window where you've got all the different video streams, and then you can choose which one is live. But you can see them all before you choose them. So you need to output that to a separate monitor. So you're already kind of multiple hundreds of pounds or dollars down the line, and it's fiddly, and you need space for another monitor and all the rest of it. Whereas actually, if you could do it all on a Stream Deck, yes, the screen isn't as big, but if you just want to quickly see what's the camera, which camera do I want to switch to now? I want the side shot of me. Okay, being able to see that you're in frame, being able to see that the camera is working. There's loads of, that's a really cool idea. You know, if when I push that button, it flips to that source, then that's really cool as well. So I'm definitely going to be looking into this to see if I can kind of take some of this code and implement it myself and make it so that my Stream Deck acts as a video monitor source for the different cameras I've got, and then I can flip to and from, but I can see, if I look at the Stream Deck, I'll be able to see the video feed on the button itself before I push it. I think that's really interesting. Yeah, so thanks very much to John for writing it up. I'll put a link in the description. It's definitely worth a read. Even if you don't plan on taking any of this stuff yourself, John's done a really good job of writing up the process of how he went through it, some of the sticking blocks, and all the code he's done, apart from some of the stuff he can't, that because it isn't open source. All the stuff he's done that he's put together, he's put on GitHub as well. So love that. All right. We're nearly done. So last thing, and if you'll forgive me and permit me some personal information, some personal news, I set myself a challenge at the beginning of this month to run 92 miles, which sounds like both an impossibility, but also an oddly specific number. So 91 miles is the distance that is travelled on average by an ambulance from our local ambulance depot. And so I'm raising money for them via the East of England Ambulance Service NHS Trust. And so the challenge was to run more than what an ambulance would do on its average shift. So that's why I set myself a challenge to run 92 miles in February. I have completed that. I completed it yesterday with the last couple of miles. There's actually 4 of us did it together as a team, so that was really nice to be able to do it as a team because we all encouraged each other. I'm not sure we would have done it and completed it had it not been for that. But yes, the point of all of this is to say that the reason I ran 92 miles was to raise money. So if you're still listening, then you can help me. I've done the running so you don't have to. What you can do is the donating. I put a link in the description along with all the other links to the things we were talking about. If you're able to throw a couple of dollars or a couple of pounds my way, that would be amazing. Thank you very much. Think of it like a tip jar or buy me a coffee or a Patreon, because I don't have any of those. So if you've found this show or any of the previous shows or videos useful, use the donate link instead. That would be amazing. Thank you very much. But also, it was kind of interesting for me to do, because going into it, I'm going to kind of think about how I put this together and put it together properly on LinkedIn later. But going into this, if you'd asked me to do and go and run 92 miles, that's an impossibly large challenge and an impossibly hard challenge. And I probably would have written it off as not something I could have done. But actually, if you break it up into manageable sections, it's actually, you know, it's 5 miles here, it's 5 miles there. And I kind of set myself a plan of, okay, well, if I could do 30 miles the first week, that would be a stretch, because that's 5 miles a day for 6 days. But I did it, and then I did it the next week, and then suddenly I was at 60 miles, and doing 90 did not seem quite so terrible, even though by that point my legs really hurt, my knee was, I've done something to my knee. But actually breaking up really big, nasty challenges into small bite-sized chunks means you can achieve what actually you thought maybe you couldn't. So that's what I've taken away from doing this as well, which has been very useful. So yeah. So I've kind of learned something in doing this that I will take forward. Anyway, that really is everything I want to talk about now. So I'm going to stop waffling and let you get on with your day, and I'm going to get on with mine. And whatever it is you're doing, have a great one, and I will talk to you again next time.